656. And very soon we have to talk about Solihull Moors, because what an amazing night they had. Rakeem Omar at breakfast. BBC Radio WM. There's going to be a new memorial at the National Arboretum in Staffordshire. It will be the UK's first for LGBT veterans discriminated by the gay ban in the military. Many lost their careers, and some people lost their lives. The LGBT charity Fighting with Pride, they have been given a £350,000 grant to create this. So earlier in the breakfast show, I spoke to the chair of the charity, Craig Jones, who served in the Royal Navy during the ban.
Well, I served for 20 in total, but I served for 11 years before the ban was lifted. And it was an incredibly difficult period. I don't know if you can imagine what it can be like not being able to be the person that you are, not being able to be yourself. It was a very exciting time in my life, but became frightening on the day that I met my boyfriend, now husband, in 1995. Because from that day forward and until the ban was lifted, I could have been arrested and sent to prison for 6 months simply because I was gay. I'm thrilled to say that people can serve openly in our armed forces today without these worries and without these concerns, and they do a brilliant job. All our LGBT plus members of the armed forces at helping defence be operationally fantastic. Defines this community is that it's a community that was shut away. It was a community that has not had a voice for decades, and we are extremely keen to reach across the whole of the United Kingdom and ask our LGBT plus veterans what they want this memorial to look like, because it will bring them in their thousands.
Kevin Baisley was a flight lieutenant navigator in the RAF before being arrested in 1994 when his sexuality was revealed to the RAF police. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Rakeem.
This happened 30 years ago. Before this gay ban was lifted then, in the year 2000, could you take us back a bit and tell us what it was like for you then, during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I had only ever wanted to fly. It was the only career I'd ever wanted growing up, and getting into the Royal Air Force was my singular focus in life. And when I signed up in 1985, it was one of the best days in my life. But at that time, I had no idea I was gay. I was a fairly naive 18-year-old going straight in from school, but I'd got my dream job, or at least my pathway to it. And I joined the Royal Air Force and trained, became a navigator. And it was actually a number of years before I realised myself that I was gay, and I came out to myself, and that was probably sort of not until the early 90s when that happened, 91, something like that, where I came out to myself and I realised that actually I was unwanted by the service that I had sworn an oath to and would fight for if needed. And I knew that from that moment on, if I was discovered, it would be the end of everything that I had worked for. Throughout, my career, even before I came out to myself, there were always stories of someone who had been outed at such and such a station and had been dismissed, had been jailed, and discharged dishonourably. And so, it was always there in the background, but until I came out myself, it wasn't something that particularly impacted me. But from that moment onwards, every morning you'd be waking thinking, oh, have I said the wrong thing? Have I left something out that someone might see and would be the end of my career?
What was that like for you? How hard was that to do? I mean, not only were you there putting your life on the line for the country, but you're also hiding who you truly are.
It was really stressful, and if you think about it, if you're diverting some of your capacity to hide your true self, you can't be your full capacity at the role you want to excel in. Being in the armed forces in any role is highly demanding, and you need to be able to give it your all. And so if you're distracted, even to a small degree, by trying to remember what pronoun to use about the person you'd been seeing at the weekend, silly little things like that. I mean, if you just try and imagine a normal Monday morning conversation, having been away with a friend, and trying to remember, oh, I mustn't use him, I mustn't say he, and silly little things like that. But it's that kind of distraction, that kind of stress that was always there.
You were arrested in 1994. What happened?
So I stupidly lost a wallet, and that wallet contained some evidence that I was gay. It was a membership card for the Gay Bikers Motorcycle Club, and that I was a member of at the time. I lost it. It got handed in to the RAF police. They then met the aircraft when I came back from a training flight one day, and I was marched off the aircraft past all of my colleagues and my crewmates, taken off to the RAF police flight, and sat in an interview room with a squadron leader from the Special Investigation Branch, and there followed a very lengthy, very detailed, very intimate, very exhausting and very personal examination of my life and what I did and who I did it with, and whether I'd done it with another RAF person or another military person, and if I had, who they were, and would I name names, and just constantly going on trying to find other people.
You were asked basically to snitch on others, almost like a bit of a witch hunt. What would that do? How would that help anyone? And how do you sit there and try and answer those questions, and also not try and answer those questions?
It was awful. I mean, at the time, there were very much witch hunts going on. They would have the military police would follow people. They would sit outside of known gay establishments trying to identify service personnel going in. There were searches of barrack rooms and things like that would go on from time to time if someone had heard a rumour. There was very much an atmosphere that they were hunting out the deviants and perverts that weren't allowed within the armed forces, that weren't good enough to be in the armed forces. And being asked to snitch on other people, it was, integrity was something that was very much important to anybody in the armed forces. And, I wasn't going to put anybody else through what I was going through. Not that I particularly knew anybody else. I was very naive. I'd kept myself to myself. I certainly didn't have any relationships with anybody who was within the armed forces. So, even if I had been of the kind of person who would have given up somebody else's name, which I wasn't, I didn't know anybody to give up anyway.
Yeah. This ban was lifted in 2000. Your experiences were in the early 90s. We're not talking about the early 1900s here. What difference do you think it would have truly have made on the force, people's sexuality? What were they fearing, I should say? What would have been the impact for them, do you think, if people were, out about their sexuality? What would have been the impact for them?
Well, the armed forces themselves were constantly afraid that we would be security risks, we would be blackmailed because of our sexuality, completely missing the irony that, of course, that if we were allowed to be open about our sexuality, we couldn't be blackmailed for it. So it was silly things like that. They were afraid that we would be other people wouldn't want to share a squad room with us, or a fighting trench or whatever. But if you think about it, someone's sexuality has no bearing on their patriotism, their courage, their ability to carry out their role, carry out great roles of acts of heroism, or simply just to fight for the rights and citizens of the country that they have sworn an oath to defend.
Yeah. I mean, look at the state of things now. I think things are moving just as normal now, with people being able to be who they truly are. I'm so sorry that this happened to you, Craig. I mean, After that
Kevin.
arrest, you continued on. I mean, you've been with the RAF since you left school. How did you cope with things after that?
It was, it was a massive shock. It was the only thing I'd ever trained to do, I'd ever wanted to do. So there I was out in the civilian world in 1995. No directly usable qualification. There wasn't a great demand for civilian navigators by then. We'd all been replaced in the civilian aviation world by computers and things like that. So, I retrained as an accountant because I'd been good with numbers, I've been good with people, and that seemed a good way to try to get back to the kind of salary that I had lost overnight.
Wow. Your life changed forever from that moment, and that's the history of the forces, and it can't be forgotten. Here we are in the present. The announcement, there's going to be a new memorial at the National Arboretum in Staffordshire. How significant is today?
It's a wonderful piece of news. The Lord Etherton report that was delivered last year had 49 recommendations in there, and a couple of those were to do with making sure that there was a memorial for LGBT personnel. I mean, if you look at the history of conflicts, there were 1 million British personnel who died during World War I and World War II alone. And so statistically, that could be somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 gay people died in service in those two conflicts alone. Their bravery, their patriotism was as strong as anybody else's, and certainly their blood was as red as everybody else who died. And the hypocrisy at the time was really quite outstanding. They were seen as deviants and perverts with an illness, they were criminals, but they were unofficially tolerated to the end of the war. Basically, they were deemed good enough to fight and die, just not good enough to live and love.
Wow. And today, a new day, fighting with pride, given £350,000 as a grant to create a memorial to those impacted by this, including yourself, Craig. The government have said,
Kevin,
has
by the way,
accepted the intent behind all 49 of the LGBT veterans' independent review's recommendations and have apologised. They also say there is support available for veterans affected by the ban on the government's website. Kevin, I want to thank you so much for being here with us on The Breakfast Show this morning. Quite a few of you have been messaging in and sending in your thoughts and comments about this story. I'll get into your messages after this.